Well, welcome everybody to the conversation. I'm here with some dear friends of ours, Anthony and Erika Tate. So thanks you guys for doing this with us.
No problem.
It's really sweet to have you. So for everybody, a lot of our passion for doing these conversations actually started with hanging out with you guys and conversations we've had over the years. And so this is really special. So having you guys here is really fun. So for folks that don't know the both of you, why don't you just tell us a little bit about like where you grew up and where you're coming from?
You go first.
Well, I grew up in Los Angeles, California. Went to high school there, junior high school there. I'm an LA native. Moved to the Inland Empire about 7 years ago.
Okay.
And so that's about it.
Yeah. What was like? Can you describe even like the neighborhood you grew up in?
Oh.
What was kind of the demographic of your area?
So where I grew up, predominantly Black, Hispanic.
Okay.
All my schools were mostly African American, Black. As we progressed in age, obviously the demographics started to change, more 50-50 Black, Hispanic.
Okay.
I didn't really interact with white people until I got to college.
Okay.
As crazy as that sounds.
Yeah.
When I got to college is when my eyes really began to see the world totally different.
Okay.
See different people, different cultures, and so. But where I come from, inner city Los Angeles,
Okay.
the stuff that people love to report on, the crime, and it's not really how it is, but that's where I come from.
Okay.
That's what made me, so.
Yeah. So real quick for you, Anthony, growing up then, what was it like for you growing up in predominantly Black, Hispanic community, and then like you said in college, getting your just experiences with white community? What was that transition like going from one thing for all those years into something different?
Well, when I got to college, only thing I knew was what I saw on TV, right? My high school was inner city, junior high school inner city, elementary inner city. I had white teachers, but that's not really the same as somebody as your peer.
Okay.
And so when you got to college, it was a little weird, because you didn't know where you fit in, And so it's funny, in one of my classes, the professor, he had us pause and look around and say, look, everybody, you guys self-segregate. All the Black students sit over here, all the white students sit over there, all the Hispanic. He says, so what we're going to do, we're going to mix this thing up. And you don't even think about it. It's just something that happens. You just go and you sit next to people who look like you, you know. And so college really taught me to look broader, and so coming from high school, you don't have that problem, Everybody look like you, Teachers are teachers,
right.
But all your friends, look like you. And so there's never any issues as far as, hey, what do you mean by that? Or, the cultural differences are minute. We all experience the same thing. You say, what's up? Proverbial head nod, we all know what that means. And so when you get to college or when you go in different environments, that tend to lend itself to new experiences. And I think it helps you grow as a person.
Was it challenging?
Not for me. I mean, I was, when I initially started, I was pre-med. And so I was taking a lot of science classes. And so you get to meet different people and, you tell them stories about yourself and you listen to stories about them and, you realize that everybody has a crazy uncle or aunt.
Yeah.
And
so you're all the same in that regard.
I mean, things may have been different. I remember in a constitutional class I took, one guy, he was adamant about, the inner city, there's no excuse because, if I can do it, you can. So the argument played out. He said every school is the same. Well, okay, let's hear about where you come from. Well, my parents were drug addicts and this and that, and I went to school in Huntington Beach. So you going to tell me that the educational system in Huntington Beach is the same as the inner city? Nah. So even though you may have had parents who were on drugs, you had an educational system that was in place that was able to carry you across the finish line. Whereas where I come from, not only do you have parents that are not involved, the school system is subpar, it's underfunded, your books are tattered, and so you can't really compare the two. And so that was a robust argument where he wasn't going to convince us and we wasn't going to convince him.
So just stalemate at that point.
Interesting. So you run into that stuff a lot, but more often than not, you get people who are interested.
Yeah, who want to know.
Yeah, who want to know where you come from.
That's awesome. Eric, what about for you? Where'd you come from?
Similar situation as Anthony. We actually went to high school together. He is 2 years above me.
So you were scheming the whole time, huh?
Fun fact, I had a crush on him in high school. But he didn't know who
cute,
I was.
Man. He's a looker, dude. He's a looker.
He didn't know who I was, but I was friends with his sister, and sister is the same year as I was. But went to Locke, with him, which, I mean, by anybody's standards in like Los Angeles, LAUSD would have considered a lot at the time that we were going there, one of the poorest, worst schools in the city. It's because, you know, gangs surrounded the school. I mean, we've had more shutdowns than I can even count. Race riots, and he's talked about the black and the brown. In most cases, we seem to get along, but then there were times where it did get a little, you know, a little crazy on campus, and it would spill out. Some of what was in the community will somehow spill into, you know, our campus. But for the most part, I was a cheerleader. I did student council. We had some of the best teachers. One of our teachers, I just learned that her name is Miss Hilburn. We love her to death. She wasn't even Anthony's teacher, but she was my teacher. But she has shown up in our lives for so many graduations, just celebratory moments for him. Just being very supportive. And so while we did come from a very rough community, a very rough school, there were people in place on our campus that are working with us who were fighting for us. I mean, Miss Garrett, Miss Talley, Mr. Mandel, who was my college counselor, and he was probably the only white. Mr.
Norman.
Mr. Norman, but Mr. Our school counselor, they used to call him, you know, our white daddy, because he was like the only white guy who, like, he cared for us. He made sure we went to college. He made sure that we did, you know, something with our lives. And he's the reason why I was a part of the program for UC Berkeley. And I got into Berkeley. It's because he nominated me to apply for the program. And so I was on Berkeley's campus in the summer of my 10th grade year.
So you got to see it.
I got to see it, and so that was an experience that he afforded me because he was so invested in the kids, those who had potential and wanted to do something with themselves. He didn't let them fall in the cracks. Mr. Andrews, who was our music teacher, who is credited for a lot of celebrity success in the music industry. Our high school was known for its band even in the 70s, and so he played an integral part in the music department, which has groomed so many people to be successful. And so while we did live in the heart of pretty much Watts, South Central Watts, even in that, we were still afforded some great experiences. Some friends, lifelong friends. We were just talking to a friend from high school. She's crazy. We love her to death. But our friendships, some great friendships from high school, and experience. And so I love everything about that, which is kind of probably why I'm so rooted in that type of work that I do in those communities, working with the Black and Brown communities, youth, families, underserved, not having much opportunities, but so much potential that just needs to be fostered and you know, and directed, so to speak.
So with those journeys growing up, what were both of your faith journeys like? Like, where did you start walking with Jesus? What was that like? Was it different for each of you? What was that like?
I think it was different.
Yeah, it was different. So my mom, I didn't grow up in a house with a dad. So vague memories about going to church, the proverbial holidays, Christmas, Easter, that was probably it. And then I started dating a young lady like in the 10th grade.
That's why he didn't like me.
No, this is another.
We go way back now. We go way back now.
This is like maybe 9th, 10th grade. This is no. So, but you like a girl, you know, and you go over and you know you go to church with them. And so I was going to a church in Compton, I believe it was called Double Rock Baptist Church. I believe it's still there. And that was literally my first real introduction to church. Baptist church. Pastor screaming, yelling, the whole nine, choir rocking, but I wasn't interested in a girl. But I was in church. You know, Spirit of God was in the church, and that was the first time I got baptized. Was in that church. And so I was listening, but I really wasn't listening. But that was my first introduction to church. And then once I got my senior year, I'm dating somebody else, and that's when I really got in church.
Okay.
I was going and I was actually listening, for my own benefit, because I mean, you just don't follow stuff. You want to know. So I was reading the Bible on my own, and I was just listening to the pastor, and he's still a pastor to this day. He used to say all the time. He said, if you're sitting in my church and you're dealing with any type of sin and you don't feel uncomfortable, you're not itching while I'm preaching, then you need to go somewhere else because the anointing is not on me. He said, if you're gonna go to hell, don't go to hell sitting in the front row.
Yeah.
Get on a flaming broom with a can of gasoline and go to hell. Don't come in here. And he was a real straight shooter. And so those type of preaching, that's kind of what I was accustomed to, right? And so that was my first real introduction to church, Jesus, and what that was like for me. So 10th grade, high school, and then that pretty much started it after high school. I kept going to that same church, well into college. So
that's awesome. Eric, what about for you? Was it similar or real different?
No, I grew up in the church.
Okay.
So my dad was a deacon in the church.
What kind of church was it growing up?
Non-denominational Christian church.
Okay.
Black church. I don't know.
Black church?
Yeah.
No, was your all black church too?
Black
Where
church?
you started?
Yeah, it's all black church. And so culturally, it's different than, where we go now. But it is, and my pastor at the time, he passed away a few years ago, but he was like a father to me. He, and his family are like my brothers and sisters. My brother was supposed to be named after him, his middle name, but my mom screwed that up. She screwed it up like horribly, but that's how close we were.
Wow.
And my dad at some point was going, but then he strayed away, unfortunately. But he's still around, but he's just not in church.
Yeah.
But my mom, her godmother, which was like a grandmother to me, because I didn't know her mom. Her mom passed away in '88, so I was really young.
Yeah.
But we used to go to church together. It was my mom and 5 of us.
Okay.
Yeah, I did praise dancing in the church. I sang in. It wasn't our church. Well, I sang in the church choir, but then I also joined like a Christian gospel group.
Okay.
And it was called Team Jesus, and we would perform. And
Team Jesus.
I
like it.
Yeah, and I'm still friends with all of them. They're like family to me, and
That's awesome.
I was always involved in the church, and a lot of, I don't want to say who I am, but a lot of who I am is because I can always refer back to conversations had. I remember there was a moment in our lives where things were very difficult. We were pretty much struggling, and my pastor, Pastor Robbie Horton, Apostle Robbie Horton, he would always say, "You're not broke, you're not struggling, you're just in between blessings."
In between blessings.
In between blessings.
Wow.
And so like little stuff like that you're able to remember when you're going through, those are the things that have always, don't make any decisions before praying and, hearing from God and, those types of things. I got that foundation from the church that I attended growing up.
Now, once you guys got together and then, through the journey up until now, have you been in predominantly black churches? You've been in predominantly multi-ethnic churches? What's kind of been your journey together in church life?
Well, when we first got together, we were going to the church that he was talking about.
The one I initially started, but now he had gotten bigger, so he went from a small church, they purchased a building, so now it's a large church.
Okay.
But he still remembered me.
I was going to say, I've never, that was my first Sunday there, but he hadn't been in years, and he immediately knew who he was.
Wow.
Yeah. And
That's
so
awesome.
no matter how big
That's
the
awesome.
church was, that kind of speaks to,
the community.
The community, right?
Yeah, it's powerful.
And so, I don't want to say I'm connected, but I have friends who go to that church and are heavily involved, and it's always really good to hear all the good things that are going on there. And so they're doing an amazing job. He's still who he is.
Apostle Ron C. Hill.
Love and Unity.
Yeah, Love and Unity. And so when we moved to Riverside in 2012, I wasn't gonna make that commute. It was just too far, and so
you guys were part of that community all the way up until we moved out to Inland Empire.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so when we first got together, we visited her church a few times. They held it out of a hotel in Culver City, so we went, which was different for me because I was used to a big church.
Okay.
And this church was small, 20, 30 people maybe. And so, and even then I wasn't really connected, so I'm kind of on the surface like, is this church? What's going on here? But we were courting, we were dating. I don't know, were we married?
I don't know.
Yeah, it was
It all
rough.
blurs
Yeah, it
together.
was rough.
Yeah.
And so
It was a rough.
once we moved to Riverside, we didn't know where we wanted to go. We didn't.
Oh, okay.
We didn't say we wanted to find a black church. Like the first year, we didn't even go to church.
Okay.
So we moved out here in 2012, and then for the first year, we were just happy to have bought our first home.
Okay.
And so
yeah.
we were just, just hanging out on Sundays. We would just lay in bed or go walk around our neighborhood that we were, because we were transplants. We were LA natives, and so
Okay.
we would just discover Riverside, at least the area we were in.
Right.
Go to Costco, our favorite place, and that's how we transitioned to Riverside. And so we left the church obviously in Compton, and so
Okay.
in 2013 is when we found a church. We Googled some churches, and the church we attend now we actually saw on the way back from like a Chick-fil-A. And
Okay.
I liked how the building, because I'm still superficial. I ain't really, I wasn't really. What's the word? I wasn't close to Jesus. I was probably, wilding out. I don't know. I wasn't doing what I was supposed to. So
Okay.
I liked the way the church looked. I'm like, hey, babe, the church looks nice. And so we went home, and one Sunday we gave that church a try.
Okay.
And this was we didn't know what the church was. We didn't know
Yeah.
the makeup. We just knew we liked the building.
Okay.
And until we showed up on a Sunday, and I'm like, dude, you looking around like, dude, there's a bunch of white folks in here.
So not a black church.
No, not at all. No. And so, as black folk, normally when we walk into whether it's a restaurant, a city,
Yeah.
mall strip, church, you start looking like, is any black?
Yeah.
Oh, there go one. And so, I don't know if we were that exaggerated, but we definitely, even if it's through eye contact, we're looking
Right.
around, and we made our way to our seats, and we sat down, and I remember this because we're sitting there, we're just kind of nervous, and we don't know what's going on, and the pastor gets up, and I'm like, dude, hey, that was the dude who was sitting next to us. Like, he was just hanging out in the back, mingling, and then when the sermon started, I'm like, because in black churches, the pastor, he's revered. Like, he don't really mingle like that.
Okay.
Like, he got security in some case, and I'm being
Yeah.
I'm being facetious, but
Yeah.
he has a big chair. You don't really approach him.
Right.
It's like, but the pastor got up. I think he had on flip flops, and he walked up on stage. Hey, my name is so and so, and
Yeah.
we were like, dude, that's cool. Like,
No, I think that was you too. You had on flips for sure.
I mean, that would make sense. Because that's what I was curious to hear, because obviously coming from a black
Yeah.
church experience,
Yeah.
what was that like then coming into not only just a vineyard church, which would have been different than,
Yeah.
just sounds like the church that you were a part of,
Yeah.
but then coming to a church where you look around and don't see a lot of black folks in the community, what was that initial moment like for you as you came in?
Well, for me, like Anthony, I hadn't been around white people until I got to college. I remember being in
okay.
lectures, being one of 300 in a lecture hall, because there just weren't that many of us
Right.
on campus. But also, like he said, we had designated days. We made sure we had community together. So even though we knew that we were maybe the only one in a lecture or
Yeah.
a student group or something that we were pursuing, we knew that we created spaces for ourselves to make sure that we were making time for each other.
Okay.
Wow.
Wow.
So even in those other environments where there was somewhat of a culture shock because there were so many other people that didn't look like you, we were able to get together with those that
Okay.
did, even if it was a few, but that wasn't an option at the church because there weren't.
Right.
There
wasn't even enough to get a group.
No. And so, and even then, right, there's black African Americans and then there's African. And so you're talking two different cultures within itself. And so there were Africans and then there were some African Americans, but you learn that stuff, right? And so, okay, so we point out, we see them. And I know one of the things that we said, because we said we just want to go to church, get the word, and go home. We didn't want to get involved. We didn't want to make friends. Like that just wasn't on our agenda to do because we just didn't want to entertain it.
yeah.
Now, was that because it was a predominantly white community, or you were coming
this
in
was
already
before.
with that mindset?
No, that was before.
Okay.
This was pretty much the agreement that we had with each other as we were thinking about looking for a church closer to where we live.
Got it.
So this had nothing to do with once we got there.
You were already in that mindset coming in. Okay.
Yeah, and so shockingly enough, going to that church, you would think that we would have been able to kind of stick to that because it culturally just nothing that we're used to. It wasn't what we were expecting. We stood out like sore thumbs just because we were maybe 2 of 4 people in there that looked like us.
Okay.
But everything that we said that we didn't want to do is exactly what God has led us and called us to do in that same church.
But let me interject. Another huge point was that, we filled out the community cards if this is your first time, and they sent her a Starbucks card. And I'm like, what? I don't do Starbucks, but she's a Starbucks fiend.
Okay.
And so that sort of started it. I'm like, dude, it's pretty cool.
Okay.
And so we kept going. Yeah. And we were going through another rough season in our life, and the church is big on groups.
Yeah.
And we were going to groups, and when I say people who genuinely cared, like it was amazing. Like we didn't even know these people, and I'm in there bawling tears. She's bawling tears, and I remember I was getting ready to go through some training, and this gentleman, he was like, "Don't worry, you're gonna get through it." I'm like, "Bro, you don't understand, man. Like, don't nobody. It's like a 65% failure rate." He's like, "Nah, you got this." And to this day, when he may not remember my name, but he remember that small group that we were a part of when we first initially joined the church way back in 2013. He'll come up and shake my hand and ask me how everything is going, And but even when we were going to the church and in that group, right? They would see us on Sunday. Hey, how's everything going? I'm like, dude, they remember. Like it was such an amazing feeling that we were able to just unload on strangers.
Right.
We didn't know anybody, Like I said, we picked a church because I liked how it looked.
Yeah.
We had a church literally across the street from us that we could have walked to.
Wow.
And this one, 2-3 miles, but still.
Right.
But the amount of feedback and love and just prayer from the stuff that we were going through, man, it got us through that season. I know it got me through that season because it was dark.
Yeah.
It was real dark. And to this day, like I said, the people who were in that original group, the main guy who was leading it, he'll see me and he'll come up, shake my hand, ask me how everything is going. And so initially, like I said, we were put off, because I'm like, a lot of white people, man. Like,
right. So even in the small group, was it mainly white folks?
Yeah, we were the only ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nothing about the demographic changed.
No. Okay, so let me ask you this then. What was it like going from, because obviously you can be on a Sunday morning, and it would be striking to you, I'd imagine, knowing not many black folks in the room. But then going into a small group where there's 8 or 10 people, I would imagine that's got to just exacerbate that reality. So what was even that like? Was it scary? Was it uncomfortable? Was it totally fine? What was that like? Just being in a group all of a sudden with.
Well, for me, I didn't know what to expect because in our church we never did small groups.
No.
There was there was Bible study.
Yeah.
And you may have like a prayer meeting or something like that. But small groups that was new to me, so I don't know what to expect. And I don't think he.
No, I mean I think we both, while we were going every Sunday, we would look on the list because they list the classes or the small groups. I'm like, that sounds good. You want to check this one out?
Okay.
Like, and it was like a Wednesday or something, and let's check it out. And I just felt like me, I'll share, right? If I feel like the space is safe, and like I said, what we were going through at that time, it was so rough. Like I said, and when I started telling stories and I'm bawling, it was like literally everybody was drawn in.
Wow.
And they just wanted to pray. They didn't know me from Adam. They didn't know her from Adam.
Right.
We just showed up, joined the group when they started, and people was willing to pray and just say, hey man, you're going to get through it, whatever.
So they just loved on you in the beginning.
Yeah, like literally no judgment.
None.
And like I said, we went in with no expectation because we have never experienced what a small group was. But then at the same time, I don't think either of us were expecting to be so vulnerable in such a new space with people that we didn't know. Yeah. And get the response that we did because even in a lot of why we said we don't want to get involved is because you want to kind of stay out of the drama. You know what I mean? And you don't. Sometimes your business becomes the church gossip. And people, and we just didn't want that. And we thought we were doing pretty good, just me and him,
Right.
getting through it together. We knew we needed God, which is of course why we knew we needed to find a church.
Right.
But for the most part, we didn't have that level of understanding of community until we joined small group. Yeah.
So then, okay, so you start that group, and did you stay with that group for a while, like that group of people?
Yeah, well, because they do them in trimesters, however they do them semesterly, and so we went, as often as our schedule permitted.
Right.
We went every Wednesday, and so it was the same. They would read, whatever the message was for that or the topic was. Like I said, I'm a participator. Even in college, even now, I'll raise my hand and I'll say what's on my mind, because I feel like I got a unique perspective on whatever it is. Right. Sometimes I got questions, but I'm a big sharer. And so, a lot of my reply to the lessons and to the topics were intertwined with my own personal stories. Times where me and her wasn't seeing eye to eye, we go to small group and, we'll work it out there. Yeah. Obviously keeping some stuff personal, but we will work it out. But like she said, we were always loved on, and we never felt like we were judged.
Okay.
It was literally like a therapy session. Mm-hmm. Like I said, to this day, I remember the head guy of the group, and it was just an amazing. And I think we needed that at that, and that's what really locked us into the church.
Okay.
Never mind when we're sitting in there on Sunday morning. Only 2 or 3 people look like us, because to this day, I sit in the same exact space where we sat when we first showed up.
Yeah.
Going on 7 years ago.
Okay.
Right? And so, never mind the entire congregation. That small group experience is what, dude, this is awesome.
Right. That's what's kept you there.
That's what drew us, and that's what drew us, and that's what kept us.
Yeah.
So then even just being a part of the church community, now having been there for a number of years, what's it been like for you, just even along racial lines? Or has race played a role? Has it been challenging? Has it not been challenging? Because obviously you went from a predominantly black space, now you're in a predominantly white space.
Yeah.
What's that been like, just really in a new environment in that regard? I'd love to hear what the experience has been like.
Well, what's cool is that I think we've been able to see the church grow and become more diverse. It's still majority white, but you see more of people from other races, different backgrounds are represented in our congregation now.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing to see.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and a lot of it, I believe, has to do with the outreach work that the church does. I think I know there's a significant amount of Africans who go to our church, and they pull in the people that they know who are here visiting, or who they know have moved here, and so there's a growing African community at the church. We're talking about from Uganda, to other parts of South Africa, Nigerian women and men who are there, and so we're seeing that. We're seeing a growing number of African Americans in our community. We're seeing, Samoan families that are coming in, and so you're seeing it's becoming more reflective of the the where the church sits.
Wow. Oh, geez, that's awesome.
It's kind of like what I'm saying. It's, of course, it's not as of course we want to see more black people, right? Because you definitely want to see more people that look like you, and but for the most part, you can definitely see the transition from where we started in 2013 to where we are in 2019. I think it's going to 2020. I think it's going to continue to grow. But that's just because of I can see that because of my involvement in the church. I can see that because of my position and the families that I work with and the people that I engage with on a daily basis. I see the kids, and so I'm able to pinpoint the. I can see it because it's reflective in the people I interact with on a Sunday basis.
Yeah.
For me, it was always tough. She's a little bit more, I don't want to say cultured, but for me it was always tough, right? The music, I'm like, what's going on, right? When we first went, I'm like, what is this? And that's when you learn there's a difference between Christian music and gospel music. Gospel music.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, right? And I'm like, and so, I'm a rhythmic person.
Yeah.
Culturally, we're rhythmic people. And I'm like, there was no saxophone. There was just a guitar, a bass guitar, a drummer, and a pianist. And I'm like, so the music was different, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so, but you find ways to get into it. And then, obviously, stories that the pastor would tell, don't really relate, but it relate to everybody else. So culturally, for me, it was like I still stood out. Okay. When I show up, I'm in sneakers and a Nike sweatsuit. Ain't really too many people dressed like me.
Okay.
In the church, but over the last few years, we've met people, met friends, and we've been involved. And one Sunday, while we were adamant not being involved, they were talking about pick a ministry, and we didn't know what each other was picking, and we turned in our car. We both picked children's ministry.
Okay.
And and so from there, we did the background check or whatever, and so we went from assistants to teachers, back to assistants to teachers to. I mean, it was a roller coaster, but it was awesome because if none of the small white kids ever saw any black people, they saw us every Sunday.
Oh, wow.
And so if they had any idea of what they were or any negative idea of what they were, who we were able to dispel some of that.
Right.
And we wasn't going in there, saying, hey, this is... No, just our presence.
Right, you just being in their
lives. Yeah, because if you go back to school on Monday and somebody says, oh, black people... Well, no, Mr. Anthony, he's my Sunday school teacher, and he's cool.
Yeah.
Or Miss Erika, and there's been some trying times, but there's been cracks, in the society that we've all grown up in, where we've seen God sort of kind of move and remind us that we're special and we're at where we're supposed to be. I remember a time where this is recently, last couple years, when the climate in this country really started to shift. And we were doing children's ministry together like we always do. She was teaching. I think we were assisting. I don't remember. But we're helping, girl with, a craft, And like I said, it wasn't that many black kids in there. Most of the kids are blonde and blue-eyed. And, I don't know if they see people who look like me and talk like me. But anywho, Erica's helping. And one of the girls reached up. And she had to be, no more than 6 or 7. And she touched Erica's exposed arm and said, look, we got the same skin. And I'm like, wow. And this was a little white girl. And I'm like, okay.
She said it so casually. And I just.
Yeah, I mean, like she was telling you her favorite color. Like it was literally just natural. It just came out and it hit me, and it hit her really hard, to the point where when she saw her mom, she broke down crying. Like, just thank you. You don't know what that meant to us. Right. Because
what did that mean? What did that communicate to you?
Well, because at that time, because of the social, the social and political climate, we were, the church still predominantly white. We would sit and we would often wonder, what do these people really think about us? You know what I mean?
And not to cut you off real quick, but even teaching, right? We had been teaching for years. Parents never even spoke to us. Yeah. They wouldn't even speak to us. Mm-hmm. Like, we have your kids every Sunday at 9 o'clock or whatever time. You don't know our names? I mean, we ain't got to be buddies, but at least how you doing? And so we had a lot of that where parents they will come in, grab the kids and leave. And I'm like, dude, do they even see us? Mm-hmm. And so, but go ahead, baby.
And so, so we started to wonder, what do these white folks, how do they really feel? What do they really think? When they see us, and we don't want to be your exception. We don't want to be your token. We don't want to be, your one black friend, or the black couple, at church who's different. And, and so a lot of stuff was running through our heads, and we were wondering, if that was even a place for us at that point, because we started to feel that uncomfortable feeling again. Yeah. Because it was just so much happening, and we had questions, but we couldn't ask them. We didn't know, so we were just we just gonna make an executive decision and probably need to go. But
did you, real quick on that, you said you couldn't ask them? Was there not a space for those questions to be asked? Did you not feel like you could broach that subject? We didn't
have relationships with people to even know those conversations were even an option.
And the thing,
we weren't really friends with with anyone in the church to even say, hey, this is what we're feeling, this is what we're thinking.
Got it.
Which is crazy because, like I said, we have been teaching some of these kids for 3 years,
Right.
3.5 years, and like we knew their kids' names, you know, because they showed up.
Right.
You know, now they're sprouting up like weeds, but that what was weird. Like, dude, we see your kids every day, every Sunday. We have them for, you know, hour and a half,
Right.
sometimes 2 hours because parents are late. And when you walk up, you don't even say good morning. You don't speak. And so, like me, like I said, she got a lot more patience than me. I'm like, whatever,
Right.
you know, like we could leave, you know. But it became really, really frustrating, you know. And then this was one of the few incidents that happened where we could like, okay,
Right.
we
What about that small group? You guys, was that a place where you could, space where you could exist with your questions?
that came later.
Yeah.
Oh, so that came, okay.
Yeah,
So,
because ultimately, I'll let her finish the story with the young lady, the girl. But ultimately, we were like, we had enough. You know, we didn't tell the church while we were stepping down, but we came to a meeting of the mind, like, you know what, we done, because we had got tired of being overlooked.
Yeah.
There was times where I didn't go when she was there, where people were hoarding over her, like she wasn't qualified to be in the classroom. You know, and so we had all this stuff going on. And we were like, man, you know, and they were like, why are you guys stepping out? We just need a break, you know. But I'll let her tell the story from there. But we got tired of it. It's like, dude, we've been here 3-4 years.
Yeah.
You come in, you don't speak, you get your kid and you leave. Like, you no good morning, no hey, thanks. Hey, what's your name? Nothing. It's like we were invisible, you know.
Okay.
And so I'm like, and then we stepped down.
Yeah.
You know, but go ahead, take it from there.
So, and so prior to that, he's right. There are some things that happened. You know, we were serving in children's ministry for years, and there were times where they wouldn't speak to me, but they were always wanting to know what I was doing. So they would come and they would stand next to me, and they would hover over me, and they would kind of look, but they wouldn't ask. You know what I mean? Hey, you know, hey Erika, good morning. How are you doing? It'll just, it was weird.
Okay.
You know, and I could be there, and they would be amongst themselves, and then I would be over here. Only time I really felt comfortable was when my husband was there, because at least I had him there to talk to and to be with. And for a lot of those people, the dynamic of the interaction changed when they found out what my husband did for a living. It was almost as if
They qualified
us, yeah.
So so explain that. So because you're a cop, so you're thinking in their minds they find out Anthony's in law enforcement.
Now they're intrigued. They want to know more about us
because again, you got to how I show up. I don't wear, which is another thing we liked about the church.
Oh, because you're in your jumpsuit.
Yeah, I mean, you know, sweats or jeans and a baseball cap or whatever. I showed up how I show up. That was one of the other things we liked about the church. Going back in the story, like, hey, we can come in shorts and flips.
Right, it's Vineyard, come as you are. So for suit and Nikes.
Yeah, or jeans or whatever.
Right,
you know, I wouldn't wear in a suit, but I shouldn't have to present myself like that. But you know, to her point, once people found out, now the dynamic started to change.
And I experienced that in different settings, and I don't hold the church responsible for that. We're talking about people.
It was what it was.
It was what it was. People. And it just as uncomfortable as we were about being in a predominantly white environment. You know, we have to understand that they probably don't engage or hadn't engaged with a whole lot of.
Yeah, they didn't know any black folks.
Yeah, they know
right?
black folks. Yeah,
okay.
And so, and I mean, and I'm not making excuses for them, but it got really weird, and so we did step down, and then we stepped down, and then the whole political and social climate started to change. We're like, okay, this is probably
now our heads were really.
So you were ready to leave it.
Yeah, at that point. Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then that happened with the little girl, and I felt like that was God's clear way
telling us to stay.
And reminding us that what we're thinking isn't necessarily what everyone else is thinking.
So you may be assuming other folks are thinking.
Right. And it's not to say there aren't any in the church that do think that way, right? But
I think for us,
but
it was
for the
just
most part,
it was like stay where you are, stay put.
Yeah.
And so when I'm inside, right, dealing with the kids, and she saw the mom, and she said, "Can I talk to you outside?" And I look out the window or the door, and they out there bawling tears, because you don't know what people teach their kids, right? you don't know what goes on once they
Yeah.
close the door and they're peeling out of the parking lot. But this was one clear instance where we knew, okay, at least one family
Right.
is teaching their kids that everybody's the same. You know, I just got a little bit more melanin than you, but if you cut
Right.
me and cut yourself, we all gonna bleed the same, you know.
So Erika, for you and that mom, you guys were in tears. What was that? What was happening in that? What was God doing in that conversation?
Well, at first I was going back and forth and trying to figure out if I was even going to talk to her because I just didn't know what the response would be, you know. But I took a chance and I did approach her and I just told her what happened and I just said, I just want to tell you thank you. I said, like, you have no idea what hearing your daughter saying that to me, how that impacted me being here. And I just want to, then I told her, I said, I just want to say that you're doing an awesome job.
Wow.
And I thank you for that. And I'm crying as I'm telling her, and initially you can kind of see that she wasn't really sure. Like, she wasn't really reading in between the lines.
Okay.
But then she began to get emotional because I think because she figured it out.
She saw it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: with your experience, obviously you're still in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So in your journey along the way, especially going through those hard moments where it could have been easier to bail, right? Like you said, the social atmosphere in our country was changing, right? It would have been obviously easy to bail. So what's kept you plugging in a space that is it still uncomfortable at times? Has it gotten easier over the last couple of years?
Yeah, for me it has, and I think it's different for me because I'm plugged in a different way.
Okay.
But in all honesty, it's the relationships that we've been able to build in the church. It's almost like when you think about family, right? You know, you may have an argument, you may not agree on things, but at the core, you know that person loves you. You know that person cares about you. You may not see eye to eye, agree to disagree, but even at the root of the problem, you know that that person doesn't mean you any harm. It's just a situation that you're dealing with now. And I'm not saying that's been my experience in terms of, having conflict and dealing with that. But for the most part, that's what the church has been for me. It's it's through my relationships that I've been able to build since being involved in the church. And those relationships have helped me get through some of the more difficult times and difficult experiences at the church. And so I don't even know how to answer that question. I don't know how to answer, because I don't want to say if I didn't have the relationships, I wouldn't be there, because, the preaching is good, the word is good, and, listening to the word and in his direction, in certain situations where we, sought counsel from him, have been a blessing to our lives. So I don't even want to go as far as to say if those relationships weren't in place, that we wouldn't still be there. But I will say that I'm not sure whether or not we would be.
So let me ask you this then. Okay, so being a part of a local church, whether it's the church that you're a part of, but I'm hoping this will be folks will get to hear in any sort of sphere that they're in. What does it take to provide? Like, what would it take for a church to be a place that is a safe space for those questions to be asked? Like, what would you hope to see in place where there'd be an atmosphere where you could come in, maybe being the only black couple at first amongst maybe a community of white folks or any other nationality? What would it take for that community to become a place where folks can come with different skin colors, different first languages, and be in a safe place to exist in who they are? What would it take to get there?
I think, going back to our current small group, now, me and my wife, I ain't gonna tell her age, but I'm 38. And our small group that we're in now, most of them are pushing 60, and they're all white folks, with the exception of maybe one who's probably our age. He's Hispanic. And me and a good friend, we have nothing in common, right? He's probably a baby boomer. I'm a millennial, whatever they want to call me. I'm a black guy, young, sneakers. But you would never draw the connection that he would get as close to us as we are to him, and we love him and his wife dearly.
Okay.
But it was through connection. We both were motor cops, and we both in law enforcement. And that group that we're a part of now, we've been able to be vulnerable. And so they get it. I remember one of the prayers, they were like, God, open up our white eyes. You know, I remember another incident that happened when First AME Church was shot up and the 9 parishioners were killed. We didn't hear nothing about it in the church. But then there was a church in Texas that got shot up, a white church, and they were raving about it. But in our small group, right, we brought that, we didn't bring it to the pastors, we talked about it openly in our small group because we felt the space was open. And to our bewilderment, I guess it wouldn't be bewilderment, but they had no idea. Because we live in 2 separate worlds. And so if you're not looking, even though this was one of the first churches raised up in America in the 1800s, I think it was formed by slaves. You know, don't check me on my history, but it's a historical church in the African American community where 9 parishioners were gunned down inside the church. It was national news everywhere. But if you're not checking for it, you don't know. And so we shared it with them. We're like, hey, but when the Texas church got shot up, they were sending baskets and stuff, and we didn't hear nothing. Wow. And they had no idea that this even happened, which kind of made me scratch my head. But to your question, for the church to be welcoming like that, I think one, you got to walk in and see people who look like you, maybe on stage or part of the team, and 2, you got to hear the conversations that you want to have. You want to see them being had from the pulpit. I remember I sent you a video clip a while ago of a pastor. I think he was up north in California somewhere, a white pastor. And he flat out said, hey, he had a black dude on stage. Hey, this is my brother. If he bleed, I bleed. If you come from him, you come from me. So if you don't like what's going on, then there's the door. Let the door not hit you. He didn't say that. I'm adding stuff, of course. But if you hear that, and then people feel comfortable. But when you don't hear that, it leaves you scratching your head. Right. You know, and you start looking at people sideways. Like, what's really going on? Okay. So for a predominantly white church to want to have people feel welcome, right? You need to hear those conversations. That way, me and her not sitting in there whispering to each other like, hey, man, what's going on, man? Do they even really know? Right. And for the most part, through her conversations, people are just ignorant. They don't know. And they don't want to know in some cases. Okay. And that's the problem. They don't want to know. That's that world over there. Right. Church is about love. Nah.
Yeah, I think that's one of my hardest thing is that somehow the church has separated themselves from the world so much that they don't understand how what's going on in the world impacts the people that attend your church. And you can't be so limited in your, I want to say, in your worldly awareness or what's going on around you, that you limit it to just what affects you. Oh, okay. You're gonna be you can't watch news that only feeds what it is you want to hear. You can't read things that only feed what it is you want to intake. You can't you can't limit the things that you speak about to your own experiences and think that you're gonna fully reach the people in the world around you. Like, you're gonna have to step outside of yourself and what it is you're used to now that we're pursuing a more diverse church. And I'm just speaking in general. I think across the board, in all churches across, I think everyone, they it's only to the world's benefit if the church is reflective of of how the world looks, the makeup, the diversity, the melting pot, different cultures, different backgrounds, and people coming together, loving on Jesus and loving on the community around them. I mean, that's where real impact happens. And so if that's the goal of the church, speaking in general, then it's the responsibility of the church also to educate themselves and make themselves more aware of what's going on in the world around them. Right. And you can't, and I think that's, it's like the whole, you pride yourself on, giving to the poor, you pride yourself on going out doing missions and praying and doing all of this, but somehow you're able to turn a blind eye to the things that most impact those poor people in this world. You know what I mean? You find justification for acting out in other areas that necessarily work against the poor. So you want to take pride in feeding the poor, but then you want to vote for and you want to be silent about. You don't want to speak against the things that are impacting the poor, which puts you in a position to have to feed them.
So maybe
You know
instead
what I
of
mean?
saying so it's easier in a sense feed the poor than maybe ask why are folks poor?
Yeah,
like get to those deeper systematic
exactly
issues.
because then you would have to then question yourself, everything that you have been taught to believe probably, and then you would have to question that there's a real thing as privilege, you know, for certain groups of people as opposed to others.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? Like you would have to go, and I'm not sure if the church really wants to do that. I don't know if the church wants to. I think it almost seems like as long as they're doing good deeds, they think they're doing good deeds. They don't tie into other aspects of their lives and their beliefs and the things that they do, how that impacts them needing or having to do the good things that they do.
So let me ask you this, like on a personal level for both of you, walking through those experiences, even the ones you're just describing, like going through some of those challenges, those things that a lot of people I'm sure could have just left, it would have been easier to leave. What is God? How do you feel like the Spirit of God has formed each of you in staying these last number of years, especially through the things that are hard? Like, what is it that God's done to change you as you've stayed?
I think clearly, I mean, at the core of our staying is that He has not called us to leave, and I think
that's the simple answer.
Yeah, and I think we both feel that. Not that we're looking to leave, but because that's we're not like waiting on God. Okay, God give us the green light, tell us when to go. Because it's not that. It's just that even in the difficult experiences that we've had at church, we have not felt called to leave. But some of the things that I've experienced, one thing in particular that really it affected me really a lot. And mind you, I went to UC Berkeley. 33,000 students. I was probably we were like 2%, if that, when I left. Black population of 33,000 students. And I've had some pretty, bad experiences there. I had a guy pull back like he was going to throw coffee on me. I had a guy sit next to me and sing the Hell the Hitler song.
Really?
I've experienced, I had another guy chase me, one of my good friends. I think we were on Telegraph. And then I lived in Unit 1, which is closer to campus, and we ran to my dorm because her dorm was further away. And it was so bad that I had to tell a group of my male friends what happened, and they went to go look for the guy.
So what happened?
Oh, he reached back to throw. He was going to throw.
Oh, that was the guy with the coffee. Sorry. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and then we started telling about the other experiences that we had, but nothing. But that's the world, right? So when you're in the world, you're expecting that
the world to
act
like
the
world operates.
Right. So I'm not out. I mean, it was scary because I hadn't experienced anything like that before that, but it didn't throw me off because I knew where I was. Right. We had the swastika painted on the Afro House. We've experienced some crazy stuff in my college years, but like you said, that's the world. But my first time being called a nigger was at church.
Really?
Yeah. And it made me, I was hurt. I was hurt. In the world, you get mad, right? Because and you're ready to kind of, you go. I mean, and I said what I said, and I responded, but I think the world ignites anger, and I think when things happen in the church, you're hurt because there's a different expectation.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? So I was really hurt.
Yeah.
And I've had some tough conversations behind that incident, which I felt was challenging not only for myself, but for those that I had to speak to about it.
Yeah.
And because it was me, and at that time, those that I had to share with, and people started to find out. It impacted people differently because it's one thing to hear about what goes on, what the Black experience is from people who you don't know, but when it's somebody that you love and genuinely care for, like, it hits you a little different.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I believe that's what happened for a lot of people, and I feel like I got the support that I needed, but it was hard because I wanted to not leave the church, but I wanted to step down. Because in my mind, I was struggling with how do I continue to serve families who could potentially think like this man? How am I, how am I, supposed to go in confidence and good consciousness that I'm taking care of kids who families see the value in what I'm doing and appreciate what I'm doing and know that, and not see me as a nigger.
Yeah.
He called me an effing nigger, and so I started to struggle with that because, in my mind, I'm like, I be damned. Like, I'm not your mammy, I'm not your nanny, I'm not, and so if you can't respect me, then if I'm like, I was struggling with, I cannot continue to love on like these families and these kids, and this is pretty much what they've reduced me to, and so I struggled with that for a very long time. But going back to the small groups, the one where he said one of his closest friends that we he could be like our grandfather. He can't be our grandfather. He'd be our daddy.
Yeah, we ain't gonna make him that up.
But with them, and that was so impactful because we've even shared stories of because around that time there were a lot of police officers who were killing black men and women at traffic stops, or just regular, interaction. It escalates on their part, and then now a black person is shot or killed.
Okay.
And I shared the story on top of my experience about how nervous I am. He mentioned that he's in law enforcement. He's and he's only identified as an officer when he's in uniform. But on the street, he's just a regular black man. Yeah. And sometimes he carries his weapon off duty. But to somebody who doesn't know him and what he does for a living, you call somebody in, black man, all black, jumpsuit, tennis shoes, has a gun. My husband is dead. And even in my own personal experience, I was on my way to work and I realized that he left his gun in the car. And I was terrified because all I could think about was, what if I get pulled over? Are they going to give me the opportunity to say that my husband, and this is his, I'm taking it to him? Are they going to give me the opportunity to explain, or are they going to see they're going to shoot me? And so I was able to be vulnerable and really speak to that fear with them. And I think with those, being able to share those experiences, as well as having the experience at the church, being able to be vulnerable about that, that has been the most impactful, I think, on me and why I stay, and has I wouldn't even call them friendships at this point. Yeah. I think it's changed them. Like he was saying, the prayer was, help us, open our wide eyes. Yeah. And that was just from conversation. That was just from us sharing. Yeah. Right. Just being vulnerable. Being vulnerable. And there's generational gaps, like big ones, right? And I spoke to, I think to spaces that could relate, because like he said, one of the guys, he's a retired police officer. That could have been, he could easily put his wife in my shoes. Wow. You get what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that's what he did, but just being able to relate on that level.
But just hearing where you're
like, man, I left my gun in the car before. My wife probably never even thought that.
And he was never scared never even thought twice about
probably not
that reality. No. Yeah.
But they I don't want to even say the acknowledgement, because I don't really look for acknowledgement. I just look for people to give us the benefit of the doubt, right? And understand we're not making this up. Like, this is life for us.
So just to have your story heard.
And while the church itself didn't provide that, our small groups and the relationships we've been able to build within the small groups created that environment where we felt safe to do that. And I think that has been the most, I know for a fact, that has been the most life-changing in terms of our walk with Christ, and how we've been able to stay and how we've been able to to even through the more difficult times, difficult experiences and conversations that we may have had in our years attending the church, is having that level of relationship, mentorship from those people. And then and even with you, I mean, some of the first conversations that I had at the church about race and politics and all these things were conversations me and you had.
Yeah.
We would go in your office and we would just talk about them. And I think it's because you were naturally interested, right? You know, and we had some good conversations about it. And you actually provided that outlet. And what I appreciated about you is we will talk about it. We would agree on a whole lot of things, but you always brought it back to Jesus. You always brought it back to what the Bible says. And that too plays a huge part in that, because what I always tell Anthony, regardless of what we feel, what we think, regardless of how our worlds differ and what our experiences are, what we do know about our church is that the people that know us love us. Yeah. What we do know about the church where we go, the people who we interact with on a Sunday, midweek, whatever that looks like, they are genuinely concerned about us, and they want the best for us. And if there's something wrong, they will want to know about it, and they will want to be a part of whatever that process is and get us through it. You know, and so it's almost like church is not even about church.
No, it's not about the building.
It's not about the building.
So what have you discovered it's about?
It's about community.
And so for me, you know, the reason why I stay, I mean, because we're totally different.
Yeah.
You know, when that incident happened with her, I was enraged, right? I was there, but I was in a different part of the church. You know, and even then, I didn't feel like God was saying, all right, time to leave. Still, right? And so small group, you know, they pour into us more than we pour into them. I think they don't actually have any clue as to how much they mean to us, as I'm sure they feel that we mean to them.
Right.
You know, the world is crazy, you know, but to her point, like, people have to understand that what's going on in the world affects the people who go to the church. Yeah. We were at the Christmas tree lighting, and she sort of kind of gave me a stern, you know, verbal, whatever you want to call it, but a guy, he's standing in there with a Make America Great Again hat for Trump. To me, and to her, that hat symbolizes hate. It enrages me when you have the audacity to walk in church with that hat on, but you claim you love people. Nah, don't work like that for me. And I gave him the nastiest look ever, and I know he felt it because he walked over. How you doing? And I didn't even half want to shake his hand. Right. But then she was like, "No, baby. People have a right to believe what they want to believe, and essentially, you know, just be nice." Like, no, at work, I gotta play nice. I gotta be nice. I'm in church. I ain't affiliated with work right now. That disgusts me, and I shouldn't have to deal with it at church. And so, but even with all that, the people who we do community with, is the reason why I stay. Right? That dude, I don't know who that dude was. You know, older gentleman, and I'd be willing to bet a whole month's paycheck that there's a lot of people who think like he does, you know, in the church. Right. Does that affect me? Yeah. You know, I remember when that election happened and we were in children's church, one guy cheered it. I'm like, you know, I had to catch myself. Like, what? But what we found out, right, our small group, you know, they love us, right? We love them. Right. Those are relationships that will never change. Even if we woke up tomorrow and God was like, hey, time for you guys to bounce. Right. We still would go do small group with them on the day that we have it. We have barbecues. We have parties. We go out to dinner outside of the small groups. When they see us, they're genuinely happy to see us. Right. You know, when
the longest hugs.
When my work schedule changed and I'm not there and they see me, man, it's good to see you. So for me, absent all that other stuff, that's why I stay. And that's why I continue to stay, right? But the moment I feel like God tell us to leave, then we're going to leave. You know, but I feel like us being there, you know, for better or for worse, it may cause some people to have some curiosity. It may not, you know, but what I think what needs to happen, you can't run from this stuff. Right. It's everywhere. Like, it's the biggest pink elephant in the church, but yet just love everybody. Nah, you got to be more specific. It's like when your wife say, go in the kitchen and get me something out of the cabinet. we got like 100 cabinets in here. Well, you know, no, I don't know. What cabinet? Well, the one down on the bottom on the right next to the fridge. I can go right there.
I don't know what you're talking about. In your house, maybe. Not in our
I
house.
was gonna say that sounds just like.
You got to be willing to call a spade a spade, and if people get offended,
Right.
because you know the hit dog will holler. If people get offended, that's something they got to work on, and maybe Jesus can then take root and start dealing with that part. But if it's never spoken, then how do you know? It's like back to your wife. If your wife has something wrong with something and she never says it, how you gonna fix it?
Let me ask you this, guys. Given what you're just saying, Anthony, let me ask you this to maybe kind of one final question, given this whole conversation. So let's take any local community. I'll say the one that I know personally. So in one community, you could have a white guy that's pro-Trump, a white guy that's anti-Trump. You'll have a black guy that's pro-Trump and a black guy that's anti-Trump. I just paint that picture to say you're going to have people all over the map, not necessarily divided by skin color.
No.
Even though that's what I would assume.
Yeah.
More people I realize, nope, it's not that clean.
Yeah.
We say all skin folk and kin folk.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, that's the church motto.
So that's how we know.
All right, so let me ask you this question then. And there may not be a simple answer, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. So when Jesus came and said that the kingdom of God is at hand, right? And we read in Ephesians that Jesus came and, it made me cry, like broke down the dividing wall of hostility. Jesus came to show us a way of life that is different, like you're saying, Anthony, than the way the world does things. Because those four groups of people should never interact outside of the kingdom. But again, this is church, like you're saying. This is the people of God. So how do we, as the people of God, do community life when you're getting all four of those folks and much more diversity than that, maybe all coming together, taking communion together? What does it take to be a people of God that can say to the world, we do vote different, but we still love each other somehow? What does it take to get there? What do we pursue?
Well, for me, a part of kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, your question was, why do you think God has called you to stay? And I really do think a part of my process of saying is Him kind of grooming me to not just be a part of the conversations and create, to allow circumstances or environments, that where I can have the conversation or have these experiences. But I've also learned a lot of grace, a lot of patience, a lot of understanding. And I think, because the guy who called me an effing nigger, he's back. And coincidentally, we met at the same place where the incident took place.
Okay. And
I've avoided him for a couple of Sundays just because I still felt hurt. I felt angry, because he had left for a little bit, but he's back. And I had to let him in to where he was going. And it was awkward at first, but I kind of feel like that's kind of what God has been doing in me, is working on that area of, I don't know if you want to call it forgiveness, because he's never apologized. Most times he avoids even looking me in my eye. But I was forced, because of circumstance, to make a decision to either send somebody else to do it and avoid him, or to extend that level of grace or forgiveness to demonstrate that in action. And I treated him no different than I would have interacted with another parent that I didn't know. You know what I mean? Right. And while he may never say anything to me, he will remember what he did to me, and in turn how I've responded to him. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And people know, and I didn't tell anybody black that it happened, because I know that would have created a situation. You have to be very selective about these things, so you have to have a certain level of awareness about the impact of what your individual incident could have on the bigger picture, on the larger community, right? So nobody black like knows what happened to me. You know, except for the guy who saw it and his daughter who witnessed it. But that conversation never. I talked about it with my husband, but he doesn't know who that person is.
Still don't.
Still doesn't know.
I'm looking.
Yeah, he doesn't know who that person is, and so I know who I can tell, who I can't tell. I see him interacting with people who cried because they were so upset but so hurt by what happened. Interact with him, having a great conversation and loving on him, but they don't know that's the person that said that to me. That same person that they were pissed at. But it's not my place to tell them that, right? Because what does that do? And so I just learned that for me, having the experiences, that I feel like God is working on me and being able to be in those spaces and working on my temperament, working on me being able to engage with different people who come from those different backgrounds, whether it's black, white, Asian, whatever. 'Cause he was Mexican. He wasn't even white. So, and even that was a shocker to me to know, like, I'm sitting up here worried about white folks, and it was a Mexican man. You know what I mean? Like, so just those experiences kind of helped. It's helping me to be able to better equip me to have these conversations in the world.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
For me, my patience ain't that long. My patience is real thin.
Which is why he would never know who he is.
It's real thin. Because if I did know who he is, I don't even know how I would respond. And I'm always in the back of my mind worrying about my employer, right? But I don't know what I would say. Hey man, you owe my wife an apology right now. Say it to me, or we're gonna have a problem, right? But I don't even know if that's the place or the space, or if that's what needs to happen, right? It's the way I treat our marriage. Like, we hope to inspire other people, right, to come to God, or even ask questions about Jesus by how I love on my wife, right? Because if you see that, hey man, why your marriage is so good? Well, let me tell you, Jesus, right? And so in the church, I've learned through her, and trust me, it's only through her that you gotta extend a little grace. You gotta love them. For us, you gotta, and it's hard to say don't think critical about these situations, because I'm thinking about your own self-interest. Why would you do that, right? You're supposed to love everybody, but it doesn't compute. And so I think if you remove that and just say, you know what, I'm just going to extend grace and love, shake your hand, give you a hug. It's not the space because you're not going to change people's minds. Only Jesus and God can do that, right? And so for me, I've just resounded to just follow her lead, honestly. Love on people. The conversation come up, I'll be real, and if it don't come up, it don't come up, because again, if this is my own personal belief, if it's not starting at the top in the church, then who am I? All we're gonna do is get into a pissing contest about why I believe what I believe and why you believe what you believe.
Right.
And we ain't gonna really change it. You ain't gonna change my mind, and I'm not gonna change yours.
Right.
And so she's had way more conversations with folks like that than I have. Right. And so and me, like I said, without trying to, you can't be a critical thinker, because when you do it, don't make sense.
Yeah.
And so when it don't make sense, it makes you upset. You can't cherry pick, right? Either take the whole tomato or you don't take none of it. And so for me, the church, and if they all walked in, brother, white dude, Chinese dude, polka dot dude, I don't care. How you doing? Give them a hug. Love you. That's it, right? Because the moment you go deeper than that, okay, you like giving to the poor. Okay. Well, let's look at the policies of X, Y, and Z. Okay, you're on Medicaid. You're on Medicare. You live in a trailer park. You don't have money. But yet you're doing this. It doesn't make sense to me. Why? And then you don't throw race in there. That's like a firecracker and gasoline. Well, my only solution to why you're doing this is because of this. And I think once you get into that conversation, it just breaks down, right? And so how do you reach those? I don't know, in the church. Only thing I'm going to do is follow her lead. And I'm a genuinely respectable dude. I don't look to fight. I ain't trying to, but in the church, like, it can't, in our small group, we talk, right? But that larger conversation has to be addressed, I think, as a whole. So everybody can at least be on the same page.
Because I'm thinking, I'm almost like, to wrap up this whole thing, that's what I'm hearing, at least from you guys, is no matter where people are coming from, what Jesus would call us to is staying engaged in the conversation is the non-negotiable. Whether it turns into a blow-up at first, but if he's who he says he is, he can walk us through those things.
Yeah.
So Anthony, you described there's really two extremes, right? We either choose to do church where we learn to have those conversations knowing that they're going to be messy. Learning that we're going to hurt each other. Learning that both communities, multiple communities, are going to have to learn how to ask forgiveness and repent along the way. Or we do church like you described, the picture you painted, where we just don't talk about that stuff. But then I would question, one, do we really trust that the Holy Spirit can actually transform people? And two, why is that worth it? Right? Like, why is it worth just going to church, putting on a smiley face, pretending we all like each other, and then we go home and nothing's changed? So we've really got to learn to trust and say, okay, Lord, you've got to show us how to do this. Because it's nothing that we know within the world to teach us how to do that. We can't put a policy in place. We can't just put some system in place where we're all going to play nice. And so I just appreciate your guys' stories.
And I just want to add that I do hope that a lot of the conversations that we've had have been more private, right? Or not. I mean, even small group is a group, but that's private. It's an intimate, private setting.
But you've got to have a safe place like this to do that.
Right. But I hope that at some point those conversations become more of a public forum.
From the pulpit.
And I'm not even saying from the pulpit. I just mean that it could be at a community center. I don't care where it is, but just there are more spaces created for the differences in opinions, backgrounds, and where conversation can happen, where there is, you might not agree, but at least there's an understanding. That conversation, and it has to be two parts, right? We have to be, those who sit on opposite ends have to be in a space to be willing to have the conversation and listen without inserting your own thoughts, your own feelings and emotions about what that person is saying or their reasoning behind why they do what they do. It's not going to work like that. Like, we have to be receptive. Those who primarily agree with how we feel and the way that we think, we have to be willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and not judge them the same way that we don't want to be judged or that we think we're being judged by those people. You know what I mean? It has to go both ways. And I think that's also where the lines get blurred. It's almost as if one side thinks the other side owes them something, when essentially it has to be mutually agreed upon, and it has to be a safe space, whether it's small or large, for those conversations to happen without the negative. You need open minds, open hearts, and you definitely need to pray before you go in there.
It's got to be God doing it.
Definitely God doing it.
Well, guys, thank you.
I appreciate it.
It was awesome, man. Well, everybody, until the next conversation, grace and peace.